Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring those teeth straightening techniques, the ones I'm talking about, the ones you may have heard about that can actually impact your breathing.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah. Specifically, we're looking at a study that compares two approaches, MARPE,
MARPE, yeah.
microimplant-assisted rapid palatal expansion,
Okay.
and BAME,
Bait.
bone-anchored maxillary expansion.
Got it.
So both MARPE and BAME are designed to widen your upper jaw, which can be helpful for a variety of orthodontic issues. But they achieve this expansion in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
It's like imagine trying to adjust a shelf.
Okay.
MARPE is like using your hands and a doorstop for extra leverage. It uses both your teeth and tiny anchors in the jawbone to create space. BAME, on the other hand, relies solely on those anchors for expansion.
And what's particularly interesting about this study is that the researchers used 3D scans to measure the volume of various parts of the upper airway, both before and after treatment with each technique.
Okay, so they're essentially looking at how these treatments affect the space you have to breathe. But what parts of the airway were they looking at exactly?
Well, they focused on four main areas: the nasal cavity, which is essentially your nose; the nasopharynx, which is the space behind your nose; the oropharynx, or the back of your throat; and finally, the hypopharynx, which is the lower part of your throat, closer to your voice box.
So they're taking into account the whole pathway that air travels through when you breathe. Did they find any noticeable differences after treatment with either MARPE or BAM?
Actually, they did. Both techniques were shown to increase the size of the nasopharynx and oropharynx.
Now, why is that significant for someone like me or anyone else listening?
Think about it this way. If you've ever felt like you can't quite get a full breath, it might be because the space behind your nose or in the back of your throat is a bit constricted. By widening those areas, both MARPE and BAME could potentially make breathing feel much easier for you.
That makes sense. So are we saying both techniques had the same impact across the board?
Not exactly. The study did find one intriguing difference between the two. When they looked at the minimal cross-section of the nasal cavity, basically the narrowest point in your nasal passage, they found that MARPE actually increased it, while BAME decreased it.
So with MARPE, the nose got a bit wider, but with BAME, it actually narrowed. Why would that be? Is that something to be concerned about?
That's a great question. The study doesn't offer a definitive explanation for this difference. One theory is that it could be due to the placement of those tiny anchors and the specific forces they exert on the bones, leading to variations in how the nasal cavity remodels itself.
So it sounds like more research is needed to fully understand why we're seeing these differences. But even with that nasal cavity quirk, the fact that both techniques seem to open up the space behind the nose and in the back of the throat is still a positive, right?
Absolutely, especially if you consider the potential implications for people who struggle with snoring or mild sleep apnea, conditions often aggravated by a constricted airway. Expanding the upper jaw through these techniques could offer them some relief.
That's a big deal. So what about that last area they looked at, the hypopharynx? Any changes there?
Yes, both MARE and BAME led to an increased volume in the hypopharynx as well. It's like a chain reaction. When you adjust one part of the airway, it can influence the spaces further down the line.
This is all fascinating stuff. It sounds like MARPE and BAME could be game changers for certain patients. But I know no study is perfect, and the researchers did point out some limitations to this particular one.
Yes, that's an important point to bring up. While the findings are certainly promising, it's crucial to remember that this was a relatively small study, and they only followed the patients for an average of 1.5 months.
So we need more research with larger groups of people and longer follow-up periods to truly understand the long-term effects of these treatments.
Exactly. And it's important for you to keep that in mind if you're considering either MARPE or BAME. It's essential to have a thorough discussion with your orthodontist to understand the potential benefits and limitations based on your individual circumstances.
So it seems like these techniques hold a lot of promise, but it's still early days in terms of research. And as always, communication with your healthcare provider is key.
Yeah, and even within this study, they noticed some interesting variability in how patients responded to the treatments.
Oh, really?
Yeah. While the average increases in the nasopharynx and oropharynx were statistically significant, the actual changes varied from person to person.
So while the study gives us some average figures, the actual impact on your breathing could be a bit different.
That's right. It really highlights the importance of personalized treatment plans because everyone's anatomy is different. What works wonders for one person might not be the best fit for another.
Okay, so we need to consider the individual and not just rely on averages. Earlier, you mentioned that the placement of those tiny anchors could be a factor in how the nasal cavity changes. Could that also explain why we see differences in how much the nasopharynx or oropharynx opens up from person to person?
That's a fascinating question and one that researchers are starting to explore. Imagine if by making slight adjustments to the position of those anchors, orthodontists could actually create more targeted and predictable outcomes for their patients. That's the kind of precision we might be moving towards.
So in the future, this could become even more tailored to the individual, ensuring the best possible result for each patient's breathing.
Exactly.
That's pretty incredible. But what about the long-term effects? I know the study only followed patients for a short period. What happens after that initial 1.5 months? Do the airways stay open?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have definitive answers on that yet. It's one thing to see improvements immediately after treatment, but the real question is, how long do those benefits last? More research is needed to determine whether the airways stay open or gradually revert back to their original state.
So if I'm thinking about these treatments, it's important to discuss that with my orthodontist and manage expectations.
Right.
We might not know for sure how long these changes will last.
Exactly. It's all about having an open conversation, understanding the current state of research, and making informed decisions together.
This has really opened my eyes to how much more there is to orthodontics than just straightening teeth.
Indeed. This study provides a glimpse into the interconnectedness of oral health and overall well-being. It's a field that's constantly evolving.
Because when you think about it, breathing is pretty essential, right?
Absolutely. It's fundamental to life itself. And anything that can help us breathe easier and more efficiently is certainly worth exploring.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. What stands out to you from all of this?
What's particularly fascinating to me is that despite the differences we observed in the nasal cavity, both MARPE and BAME resulted in significant increases in the volume of the oropharynx and nasopharynx. This tells us that both techniques hold real potential for improving airflow in those critical areas, regardless of the specific approach.
And those areas are key for breathing and speech, right? So regardless of which technique you choose, there's a good chance you'll see some improvement in those areas.
Exactly. It really underscores the idea that expanding the upper jaw, whether through MARPE or BAME, can have a positive impact on your respiratory function.
You know, I think there's a takeaway here for anyone listening who's been told they have a narrow upper jaw, even if it's not causing any noticeable problems right now.
I agree. It might be worth considering the potential long-term benefits of addressing it. It's all about proactive healthcare, understanding the connections between different systems in the body, and making informed choices to support your overall well-being.
Because sometimes a seemingly small adjustment can have a ripple effect you might not expect.
And that's the beauty of scientific discovery. It opens our eyes to new possibilities and empowers us to take charge of our health in ways we might not have imagined before.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think that something as simple as widening the upper jaw could have such a big impact on our breathing.
It is. You know, we often think of oral health and respiratory health as like totally separate things.
Right.
But this research really highlights just how closely they're linked.
And it's not just about breathing easier during the day, is it? This could potentially have a big impact on sleep quality as well.
Oh, absolutely. If someone's listening and they struggle with snoring or mild sleep apnea, addressing a narrow upper jaw could be a key part of improving their sleep.
For sure. And we all know how important good sleep is for our overall health and well-being.
Oh, it affects everything. Everything. Our mood, energy levels, focus, even our immune system. Getting quality sleep is so crucial.
Absolutely. So by potentially improving sleep, these orthodontic techniques could have benefits that extend way beyond just breathing easier.
Exactly. It's all about taking a holistic view of health and recognizing these important connections.
This deep dive has been so insightful. We've learned about the potential of MARPE and BAME to improve breathing, uncovered some interesting differences between the two techniques, and highlighted the importance of personalized treatment and further research.
Yeah, it's clear that this field is ripe with possibilities, and I'm excited to see what future research reveals.
Well, there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into the fascinating world of teeth straightening and breathing. If you're considering orthodontic treatment, especially for a narrow upper jaw, this information might give you some new things to think about and to discuss with your orthodontist.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about your options, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions about your health.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep those airways open and those minds curious.